shall return to our business. We'll now proceed to ministerial statements. I have received two requests for ministerial statements, one by the Minister of Finance and the other by the Minister of Law. We'll first begin with the statement by the Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank you for this opportunity to clarify about the state of the affairs at the current moment. I will take this time to explain what is a CDO, a collateralized debt obligation, and how did it result in a subprime crisis in 2008, and the overhanging effects which resulted in the crisis in 2010. I will also explain to the House what is the economic situation that the country faces and how will we deal with it later in the supply bill. In essence, this is for the benefit of the Shadow Finance Minister. A collateralized debt obligation is a set of mortgages which instead of being issued by a financial institution is issued from a member of the public and subsequently securitized, which means that you take a bunch of mortgages and you put them together and then subsequently you break them up into suitable denominations and subsequently resold to private investors. These assets are traded in the private market and they are not publicly listed assets. These assets were not listed in the US, they will never be listed in the Singapore Stock Exchange. All right. What happened with the collateralized debt obligation is that when a set of mortgages get securitized, the public believed that it was safe. Furthermore, all those instruments were backed by assets, and because it seemed to be diversified, the public believed that it warrants a low interest rate. The fact of the matter is this: all these mortgages are actually subprime mortgages. In contrast to prime mortgages, subprime mortgages are actually mortgages extended to members of the public which have doubtful credible rating. And so, end of the day, what we see is that we have a supposedly diversified set of assets. They are not diversified because all of them are collateralized by the same set of property, and all property prices show same correlation in terms of movement in the market. And what happened was that we had mispricing of risk. The public believed that it was safe to extend credit. Those who needed the credit accepted it. And what happened was that when the Fed in the US actually increased interest rates and that it contracted monetary supply, the housing bubble started to cool down, the prices in the housing market started to fall, and the assets that were backing all these CDOs started to fall. And therefore then, the value of the collateral behind the asset starts to fall. So what this translates is that the value of this bond starts to drop and the asset value of consumers start to fall. When the wealth value of consumers start to fall, then the consumption pattern will start to fall. And because of the fact that many large financial institutions in the US also hold many of these collateralized assets, which includes AIG, Bear Stearns, and other banks which invested heavily in them, they also showed signs of financial distress and the public started to show doubt in the ability of banks to safeguard their assets. At this present moment, I would like to ask the House if there are any issues of clarifications with regards to what is a CDO.
Clarifications are in order. Are there any members wishing to raise a clarification? Seeing that there are none, Finance Minister, you may carry on.
So in contrast with a corporate bond that we are trying to promote here in Singapore, a corporate bond is a simple debt instrument. You buy it from the market. The corporate bonds that are currently sold in the market are in denominations of 250,000. They are safe instruments. All of them are of investment grade, which means that they are actually safer than the debts of Italy and Greece. And that they themselves offer modest return, and they offer actually greater security to the public than equity assets. So with this issue, does the Shadow Minister of Finance actually understands the difference between a corporate bond and a CDO?
After he's completed his statement.
Right. So because of unregulated lending and subsequently loss of confidence in the financial market, there is an accumulation of toxic assets by major financial institutions in the US and in Europe. And this resulted in the crisis in 2008. Okay? Subsequently, because of this, that the Federal Reserve in the US tried to eliminate a lot of these toxic assets by buying them up from the market. But there are residual assets left in many of the financial institutions. And when the governments and the Federal Reserve start to And subsequently, in 2010, when the government started to feel the stress of a possible sovereign default, that they started running out of money, the public lost faith both in the private sector, the financial institutions, and in the public sector, in the government. And so this is the accumulation of events which led to the crisis that we had today. Part of the reason why we have the crisis today is because of unrestrained expenditure by the government, and this government will not run an excessive deficit in this budget. So now on to the recent measures that the European Central Bank has taken to deal with the current crisis. The European Central Bank has actually announced a $600 billion buyout package in terms of euro of toxic assets in the market. What this essentially is a similar policy as a quantitative easing policy in the United States. What this means is that there will be creation of large amount of monetary supply. Much of this monetary supply will flow over to Singapore and result in high investment in assets. This is going to put stress onto the prices in our secondary housing market. So I would like to invite the House to give suggestions on how can we cool off the secondary market, because the supply bill was written before the ECB announced this measure. This measure announced by the ECB goes against the fundamental mandate of the ECB and places stress in the international economy. And I believe that my honourable friend, the Foreign Minister, will issue a statement to advise caution on the part of Europe and to remind the ECB of the responsibility they have to their mandate and the responsibility that they need to show to the larger international community. With this, I would like to ask the House whether or not they need to seek further clarification.
Thank you, Finance Minister. You may take a seat first. Clarifications are in order. Are there any members wishing to raise a clarification to the Finance Minister's statement? Any members? Seeing that there are none, we'll move on to the next ministerial statement by the Ministry of Law.